This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you so much for joining us for this first edition of CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. A lot to get to today. An old controversy comes up over President Donald Trump's new acting attorney general. Should he be in charge of the Russia investigation? And what we've learned about his views on the Bible and justice. Plus, the departing governor files lawsuit over the vote count in the super tight Senate race in Florida. And we're going to look at how Ethiopian Jews thank God every year for bringing them back to Israel. All those stories and more are ahead in this half hour of Newswatch. We want to begin, though, with the conflict in Washington. Former Attorney General Jeff Sessions is barely out the door, and already pressure is mounting for the acting Attorney General to recuse himself in the Russia investigation. This comes as we're learning the Russia investigation may actually soon be over. Robert Mueller is reportedly writing his final report on his Russia investigation that's been a distraction for the Trump administration. The president himself is expected to send written answers to questions from Mueller by the end of the month. With Sessions gone, acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker is assuming control of the investigation, taking over for Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. But Democrats are calling on Whitaker to recuse himself because of comments he's made about the investigation before he worked at the Justice Department.
The biggest challenge for him is really going to be that the knives are out from Democrats. I mean, they are going to go after him, and you're seeing it already. As soon as that announcement was made, they started calling for his recusal. They want to investigate. No, I don't. I mean, I think there's no reason to recuse. What? Because he has an impression of what the Mueller investigation should look like that is different from what Senate and House Democrats believe. Look, it's a Department of Justice investigation. It's not a congressional investigation. He's the acting Attorney General.
Here with more about this story is senior Washington correspondent Jennifer Wishon. So, Jennifer, are we expecting Whitaker to recuse himself?
Well, Ephraim, this is Washington, D.C. in the era of Donald Trump, so anything is possible. But at this moment, we are not expecting Whitaker to recuse himself. And in fact, the law would allow him to remain in place for 210 days. If you do the math, that's about 7 months. So it looks like he's going to see this over, be over it until the end.
Are Republicans putting any pressure on Whitaker in regards to the investigation?
A lot of Republicans joined their Democrat colleagues in saying, look, the Justice Department should not interfere with Mueller's investigation, although they are saying that it's time to wrap this up, that it's been too long. This has been hanging over the Trump administration too long. But I would say, Ephraim, Republicans, they know that the president, if he is cleared by an investigation that is unfettered, then it's going to look better for him. And also, if you really zoom out, beyond the president, this is an investigation to see if a foreign country meddled in our elections. And that certainly is an interest that transcends party politics.
Jennifer, what has Whitaker said about judges and the Bible?
Yeah, well, we're learning, in 2014, Whitaker ran for the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate. He lost by a long shot to now Senator Joni Ernst. But in a debate, when asked what he would consider when judicial nominees came before him if he was elected to the U.S. Senate, he said he would be looking for people of faith with a biblical worldview. And he went on to say that as long as they have that worldview, they'll be a good judge. And if they, conversely have a secular view, then he's going to be very concerned about that judge. So that's very interesting, kind of an insight into the mind of this gentleman who is currently running the Department of Justice and overseeing this very important investigation that really has the world captivated.
Indeed. Jennifer Wishon, our senior Washington correspondent, following this story for us today. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thanks, Ephraim.
Here now is a look at some of the other major stories we're following for you inside the CBN newsroom today. Federal investigators are working to learn more about the Marine combat veteran who shot and killed 12 people inside a bar in Thousand Oaks, California. Authorities are searching the home of the 28-year-old. His name is Ian Long, hoping to find a motive behind Wednesday's rampage. Meanwhile, hundreds of people attended a vigil Thursday evening to mourn those victims. It was the nation's deadliest attack since 17 were killed at a Parkland, Florida high school. It also is coming less than 2 weeks after a gunman killed 11 people at a synagogue in Pittsburgh. Outgoing Florida Governor Rick Scott has filed a lawsuit accusing 2 Florida counties of rampant fraud count in the Senate race Tuesday in the vote count there. Scott ordered the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to immediately investigate Broward and Palm Beach counties. This as new ballots are pouring in have sharply narrowed his lead over incumbent Democratic Senator Bill Nelson. Scott said he will not sit by while unethical liberals try to steal this election. New reports say Asia Bibi is still in Pakistan awaiting asylum. Bibi and her family were transferred to the Pakistani capital, triggering expectations that a departure from the country could be imminent. The Guardian reports Pakistan's foreign ministry said she is still in the country. Bibi's recent acquittal from blasphemy charges against Islam have sparked outrage in that country. Her attorneys say she has filed an application for asylum with the Netherlands. You can find more on this story and others throughout the day at cbnnews.com. Voters turned out in historic numbers for the midterm elections this week, and no group was more important for Republicans than evangelical voters. I'm Mark Martin is on this story.
Well, God plays a big factor in my life.
The God factor was front and center. In a congressional race that saw presidential levels of voter turnout across the country, evangelical Christians showed up in droves. Faith and Freedom Coalition Chairman Ralph Reed attributes that surge to the president.
The evangelicals delivered this vote in a big way, and of course Donald Trump deserves an enormous amount of credit.
The faith-based vote surged to include more than 1 out of every 3 voters in Tuesday's elections. Evangelicals made up 26% of the national electorate, and of those, 80% voted for Republicans, with only 12% going for Democrats. But the real evangelical impact was felt on a state level, where in states that flipped seats from Democrat to Republican, the evangelical electorate surpassed the national average every time.
There are a couple people looking down from heaven I want to recognize.
In Florida, where an emotional Rick Scott claimed victory in his bid for the Senate, 30% of all voters were evangelicals, and 80% of those Christians voted for Scott.
And we have a narrow window.
In Indiana, where Republican Mike Braun won his Senate bid, evangelical turnout topped the national average by 14%, and 71% cast their votes for Braun.
Without you, I'm nothing, and with you, I'm everything.
Similar evangelical numbers helped sweep in Senator-elect Kevin Cramer in North Dakota.
The good Lord and the people of Missouri have given us the victory.
And Republican Senate winner Josh Hawley, a Christian evangelical candidate CBN News has been following since the beginning of his Senate run in Missouri.
The country needs us, the culture needs us, our society needs us. We're the ones who have to step forward and to bring the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ into every corner of our society. It's our mission, it's our duty, it's also our great privilege. It's a tremendous, tremendous privilege.
He told us his faith drives his politics.
The Lord has called us to do our part in the public sphere, to stand for Him and to stand for the principles on which this country was founded. And as I see it, my job is to be faithful to those things and to leave the rest to the Lord.
Before the election, Christian leaders called on the faithful to be good citizens, not only by praying for our leaders, but also by voting for them at the polls. This election shows when they show up, it makes a difference. Mark Martin, CBN News.
The president of the largest Latino evangelical organization says immigration reform is possible in the new Congress, and he has a plan to get there. Reverend Samuel Rodriguez told CBN News Thursday he's worked with both House Speaker Nancy Pelosi as well as the president on the issue, and he believes they could make a deal. He said that would pave the way. What would pave the way is taking citizenship off the table and giving millions of undocumented immigrants here a legal status that would not include voting rights.
The great anxiety is that Republicans believe that we are legalizing 11 to 12 million potential Democratic voters. That's the great fear. That's the elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about. It's about voter turnout and voters in the upcoming 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And if we remove that from their anxiety table, we can make a deal.
Rodriguez also condemned a reported plan for the president to take executive action on immigrants seeking asylum, saying it's best to go through Congress. Coming up, how Ethiopian Jews express their gratitude to God every year for what He did bringing them back to Israel and uniting them with the Jewish people there. We're going to have that story when we come back. Imagine God answers a big prayer for you. Would you make time to remember and thank Him for it year after year? Ethiopian Jews are doing just that, showing gratitude to God for bringing them back to Israel and uniting them with the Jewish people. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl brings us that story from Jerusalem.
It's called Sieged, an ancient holiday Ethiopian Jews brought with them on their return to Israel.
Sieged is a holiday we celebrated for thousands of years in Ethiopia, central holiday and symbol of the Ethiopian Jews. Sieged comes from the word lisgod, to worship the creator of the world.
For generations, Ethiopian Jewry dreamed of returning to Jerusalem. Now they celebrate the holiday of Sieged every year right here in the Holy City.
What we did there was to go up the highest mountain and face the direction of Jerusalem, pray for the peace of Zion and Jerusalem.
For the last 10 years, this has been a national holiday, celebrated at Jerusalem's Has Promenade overlooking the Temple Mount. A ceremony is marked with prayer and fasting. Although Sieged is not named in the Bible, Dr. Simcha Gataon says its origins are found there in various celebrations.
We do this 50 days after Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, we do personal introspection, and after 50 days, we do collective introspection, together united.
Since 1948, more than 90,000 Ethiopian Jews immigrated to Israel, including some 16,000 secretly airlifted to Israel in 1984, and 7 years later, another 14,500 came in just 36 hours. While the community's origins are unknown, their style of Judaism dates back 2,500 years. Why does the Ethiopian community still celebrate the holiday in Israel?
It's important, first of all, to say thank you to God that He granted us to immigrate to Israel, the Holy Land, the Holy City, to unite with the people of Israel, and in addition to pray that the third temple be built, and to pray for all of the people of Israel.
This holiday represents the holiday of Sieged, not only for the Ethiopians, but for all the state of Israel, for everyone. From year to year, we celebrate this. Look how many people are here. It's really exciting.
About 10,000 people came for this year's celebration, and the Ethiopian Jewish community hopes at some point all of Israel will join them. Julie Stahl, the Has Promenade, Jerusalem, Israel.
Coming up, we're going to hear from the famous musical group For King and Country about their new album and a discussion about some very deep issues, including depression and addiction. That story's coming up right after this. Contemporary Christian duo For King and Country's latest album is called Burn the Ships. The Grammy Award-winning brothers are touring the country with that musical message. We caught up with them in Studio 5 when they made their stop in Hampton Roads, Virginia.
And if you need a refuge, I will be right here until the end. Oh, it's time to burn the ships, cut the ties, send a flare into the night. Say a prayer, turn the tide, dry your tears and wave goodbye.
The new project, Burn the Ships. What does that mean?
My wife and I have got 3 kids, and when she was pregnant with our middle son, Phoenix, she was having a bunch of morning sickness, a bunch of nausea, and so she went to the doctor, and they said, hey, we can help you with that. Here's some medicine to eliminate the nausea. And for about 6 weeks, it worked. And then she went back and said, hey, it's not working anymore, and they gave her more medicine and upped the dosage. And I was in Austin, Texas with a show that night, and she calls me, and she says, hey, I need you to come home. And she says, I've been taking this medicine, and I just can't stop. And so they prescribed her outpatient therapy for about 2 weeks, and so I'd drop her off at 9 a.m. in the morning, pick her up at 2, and she'd shown so much improvement in 2 weeks. They said, hey, you're free to go, and you've done tremendously well. And soon after that, she had that bottle of pills at home. And she said, Luke, I need to go and take these pills. I need to go and just flush them, because these pills represent so much guilt and so much shame in my life. And I remembered a story many years ago about an explorer who was going to a new land, and when he arrived to explore this land, to explore the horizon in all of these ships, he realized that the men didn't want to follow him because they wanted to stay even in the dirty confines of these boats just because it was comfortable, not because it was good. And easy, right? And so soon after that, he calls them back onto the shoreline again. He said, I want every soldier on the shoreline. And once he got all of his soldiers on the shoreline, he gave the command, hey, burn the ships. because we're not retreating. We're moving into a new day. We're going to go explore a new world. And I think when my wife flushed those pills, that was her, burning the ships.
I love that.
Yeah.
Move forward, push past the past.
Exactly.
That song wasn't even written in theory for this project. It was written 2.5 years ago. And our wives have really been, both Courtney and my wife Mariah, have really been laced into this project. On the creative side, the last song on the record, we sing with them, even down to the fact that, Courtney really came to Luke and said, hey, I want you to share this story. Like, this is, if God can kind of take me from this place of addiction and so radically shift my story, I want you to share that with people.
I love pretty much every single song on the album, but one that stands out for me is when you're singing God Only Knows.
We were always taken with that phrase, God only knows, because it's such a flippant, at face value, people say, oh, God only knows.
Yeah, it's a throwaway.
It's a throwaway. And yet, if this is all true, that there is this creator and this designer, and he intervened into humanity 2,000 years ago, and that there is redemption, and he knows the hairs on our head, and yet he still has this superhero kind of love for us. That's radical. Mm-hmm. When we're coming up with the music video concept, it was the same week that Anthony Bourdain and Kate Spade had passed away. And it kind of rocked us all, as I know it did America. So we kind of built the concept of the music video around suicide prevention. And man, I got to tell you, Efron, as we've dug into this, it's an epidemic. I mean, it's the second biggest killer of those our age. We were at college a couple of weeks ago, and I just kind of, I'd not done it before, but I asked the audience, hey, how many of you directly or indirectly been impacted by suicide? And probably 80% of the kids. You're starting to see it all over the place. It's starting to become common. And I think there's a real conversation to be had about, statistically in the 80s, 20% of Americans said they were lonely. Now in 2018, almost 50%. And yet in that 38-year span, through smart devices and technology and the internet, we've become more connected than we ever have in history. But it seems like we're doing so much of it here. And it needs to be done here, and it needs to be done here. And so that's part of the song and the record's theme, is to sort of provoke some of those questions in ourselves, first and foremost, and in others.
Great job. Thank you guys both so much. Pleasure. Thank you for the new project. I look forward to what's next.
As do we.
Still ahead, a famous Christmas story is coming back to the big screen this weekend. We're going to have a family-friendly review of the latest version of the Dr. Seuss classic, The Grinch, right after this. A new animated version of the famous Dr. Seuss story, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, is coming to theaters this weekend. This one is simply titled The Grinch, and it's expected to be the weekend's box office champ, probably earning more than $60 million. Here's a family-friendly review of the film from Focus on the Family.
Merry Christmas to you!
Dr. Seuss's The Grinch focuses in on a gripey guy covered in garish green fur who lives in a cave some distance from the delightfully charming and picturesque town of Whoville. It's delightful for everybody but this fellow named Grinch, that is.
You're a mean one, mister.
From his perspective, the Whoville residents are hideously happy and cloyingly cheery. When the townsfolk set up their holiday bingles and bangles and begin singing their syrupy songs of the season, it drives the Grinch to distraction. How can he possibly wallow in lonely misery with all that nonsense going on? So while stewing sourly with his only companion, a puppy pal named Max, the Grinch hatches an idea.
What to do? I'm going to steal their Christmas.
What if he could steal all the Whoville woohoos away? What if he could grab all their goodies and make them wretched and raging, weepy and woeful? Now, that would be a Christmas to remember. Yes, we all know this story very well. Even the littlest Cindy Lou Who's in our family probably know it by heart. So some might grinchily grouse that there are some unfamiliar story changes in the fake Santa mix here. But it's all good. The lesson of friendship is sweet, the colorful story is fun, and this version even ties musical references to the baby Jesus' birth into its Whoville celebrations. I'll give the Grinch a joyful 5 out of 5 for family friendliness. For the full review, check out our website, pluggedin.com. Plugging you into the movies, I'm Bob Waliszewski for Focus on the Family's Plugged In Movie Review.
Time now for your Friday Faithful, and today I leave you with this message. The end of your rope is where God begins his greatest work, and there is then no doubt it's him doing the work. Stop trying to fix things in your own strength and let God be your strength. That will do it for this half hour of CBN News Watch. Our second half hour is coming up for those of you watching on the CBN News channel. Remember, you can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about always at cbnnews.com. And take the time to tell us what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that by emailing newswatch@cbn.com. You can also reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Have a fabulous Friday.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you for joining us for the second half hour of CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. We begin with breaking news out of Hempstead, North Carolina, where police have responded to reports of an active shooter at Topsail High School. It is still an active scene, but there are no reported injuries, at least at this hour. We're going to have more on this shooting a little later, right here on CBN News Channel and throughout the day at cbnnews.com. Here now is a look at some of the other major stories we're following for you today inside the CBN newsroom. Federal investigators are working to learn more about the Marine combat veteran who shot and killed 12 people inside a country bar in Thousand Oaks, California. Police are searching the home of the 28-year-old. His name is Ian Long, and they're hoping to find a motive behind Wednesday's rampage. Meanwhile, hundreds of people attended a vigil Thursday evening to mourn those victims. It is the nation's deadliest attack since 17 were killed at a Parkland, Florida high school. It also comes less than 2 weeks after a gunman opened fire and killed 11 people at a Pittsburgh synagogue. Florida Republican Governor Rick Scott has filed a lawsuit accusing 2 Florida counties of rampant fraud during the midterm elections. Scott ordered the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to immediately investigate Broward and Palm Beach counties. This as new ballots pouring in have narrowed his lead over incumbent Democratic Senator Bill Nelson. Scott said he will not sit by while unethical liberals try to steal this election. New reports claim Asia Bibi is actually still in Pakistan awaiting asylum. Bibi and her family were transferred to the Pakistani capital, triggering expectations that her departure from the country could be imminent. The Guardian reports Pakistan's foreign ministry said she is still in the country. Bibi's acquittal from blasphemy charges against Islam have sparked outrage in the country. Her attorneys say she has filed an application for asylum with the Netherlands. You can find more on these stories and others throughout the day at cbnnews.com. Want to turn now to former Attorney General Jeff Sessions. He is barely out of the door and already pressure is mounting for the acting Attorney General to recuse himself from the Russia investigation. This, as we're learning, the Russia investigation may actually soon be over. Robert Mueller is reportedly writing his final report on the investigation that has cast a cloud over the Trump administration. The president himself is expected to send written answers to questions to Mueller by the end of the month. With Sessions gone, acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker is assuming control of the investigation, taking over for Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. But Democrats are calling on Whitaker to recuse himself because of comments he made about the investigation before he began working at the Justice Department.
The biggest challenge for him is really going to be that the knives are out from Democrats. I mean, they are going to go after him, and you're seeing it already. As soon as that announcement was made, they started calling for his recusal. They want to investigate. No, I don't. I mean, I think there's no reason to recuse. What? Because he has an impression of what the Mueller investigation should look like that is different from what Senate and House Democrats believe. Look, it's a Department of Justice investigation. It's not a congressional investigation. He's the acting Attorney General.
The outcome of this year's national election will be remembered for years to come, possibly for what it says about voters and our culture. CBN News' Mark Martin spoke with Regent University's Lynn Marie Combe about why that's so.
What do you think about the vote among women, and what does it say about women in our society?
Well, I think women are not silent, and we care about what's happening in our culture. I think there was a whole lot more than meets the eye going on here. Yes, there was 100 new women. That's extremely exciting. I'm excited about the blue wave of pro-life voting. I totally think that God is calling more women into politics to protect the lives of women and children. Especially over the Senate last night. There were so many indications that people care about judges, and judges choose to uphold abortion or life, things that matter to families, values, things like that.
When you said a blue wave among pro-life...
I didn't mean blue.
Okay.
I meant like water, like
okay,
a
gotcha.
washing wave of pro-life advocates. I don't think we saw that in Virginia, but I think we might see that across the country. A lot of the people that won Senate races are definitely pro-life people. And now they know that one of the hugest things is putting another justice on the Supreme Court. Should we have the opportunity, there could be two others. The Kavanaugh hearings just made such a big difference in everybody's mind. First of all, was he really being targeted because he was an abuser of women? Well, no. Now we have 414 pages of investigatory evidence by Congress that says there's no evidence of any of the accusations. Really what was going on there was a fear that he might vote against abortion rights.
Do you think the nation's going to be able to unify, Lynn Marie, and step away from the political divide?
You know, I would hope so, because in my mind, the life issue protects women and children. 3 states had it on their ballots as well. I think it was West Virginia, Oregon, and Alabama. They were all trying to determine how far do we want to go with allowing for choice. And most of those ballots were all about protecting women and protecting children. I think the Gosnell movie had a huge impact with that too. But really it was the Kavanaugh hearings. People know judges matter, judges make a difference. Judges can be thoughtful and protect life, protect the lives of women. Every single woman and child needs to be protected regardless of what the state chooses to have as its law for abortion.
And quickly, let's move over to the House. What are your thoughts on that? Because of the shift in power, do you think that's going to hurt the pro-life movement somewhat?
I don't know. We'll have to see how that plays out. When we went to vote yesterday, my husband asked somebody on a local election, so is your candidate pro-life or not? And the person said, oh, it doesn't matter, it's a local election. And my husband said, absolutely matters, it goes to worldview. We didn't get a chance to find out the worldview of a lot of those House of Representatives candidates because there were so many running. So we'll have to see how this plays out. And I do think that some are still persuadable that life is an issue they want to take a position on that will protect women and children. So we'll just have to see.
All right. Lynn Marie Combe with Regent University. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Coming up, a nun riding in a police car and a police officer sitting in church pews. It's all part of a program called One. See how this program is building the bridge between the community, the church, and police. Throughout history, the church has been a driving force behind social change. Today, community-driven congregations are still playing that role. Our Amber Strong takes us to Indianapolis, where churches are building bridges between neighborhoods and the police.
Can we all get along? Can we get along?
Division between police and certain communities is nothing new. And while many enjoy an amicable relationship with law enforcement, social media shines a light on the division and broken trust.
But in Indianapolis, members of the faith community and law enforcement hope to exchange vantage points and walk a mile in each other's shoes.
All thanks to a program called One Cop.
But one thing that's really unique and special about One Cop is that it's really focused on beat police officers. These are the people who, if they're doing their job correctly, are literally walking up and down the block.
And it's something this community sees most every day. What they don't usually see is a nun in a police car, or police officers seated in pews during the week. Church leaders also get to try their hand at being officers, facing the challenge of split-second decision.
You're drinking.
The team at One Cop believes churches are uniquely positioned to break down any walls existing between the police and those they are sworn to protect.
To walk the streets, I think with a police officer would be an eye-opening experience.
Pastor Jim Wright jumped at the opportunity to be a liaison and perhaps more.
Introducing them to the community and being a host site for the community would be a really good way of connecting the community with the police officers, with us as the bridge, and then, Lord willing, opening up the door to share the gospel.
Local law enforcement are also eager to open doors and make a good first impression. If you commit a crime here in Indianapolis, you're likely to wind up here at the Marion County Jail, where you'll be greeted by a member of the Sheriff's Department. Well, local law enforcement are hoping to change all that and build a relationship with the community before they wind up in jail. Marion County Sheriff John Layton hopes renewing relationships can help cut down on counterproductive codes like no snitching. He also wants to create and build levels of respect.
You shouldn't have to fear a uniform, ever fear a uniform, but please respect it.
While Layton blames social media for the growing antagonism, he quickly admits mistakes have been made.
There are tens of thousands of police officers across the United States. Every now and then one steps out of line. Sometimes it's a mistake of the head, sometimes a mistake of the heart. It's such a minuscule percentage of the police that are out there every day dodging bullets instead of sending them.
Put your hand behind your back.
Even a few, however, can deepen the divide.
The 17-year-old lay prone on the pavement as the shots continued, 16 rounds in 14 seconds.
The aftermath captured in graphic video and streamed live on Facebook by the man's girlfriend.
In Texas, for example, tensions remain high after Dallas police officer Amber Geiger shot and killed 26-year-old faith leader Botham Jean inside his apartment. Community leaders there question why Geiger was able to stay on the job for so long after the shooting. Indianapolis crime reporter Steve Jefferson points out if and when incidents like this happen, transparency is important. He's seen it work so far in Indy.
The ongoing relationship, which still needs a lot of work, has kept things from being explosive here in our city.
He credits programs like One Cop and other faith-based initiatives for helping calm things down. Prevention is key, and Jefferson adds that training goes a long way.
Our department here in Indianapolis now actually teaches officers not to let their biases impact their work on the street. We all expect to be treated a certain way by the police, and I think them knowing how to de-escalate a situation, whether it be a traffic stop, whether it be trying to ID a young black man who you think is trespassing.
As a deacon himself, Jefferson knows the church can play a major role in building relationships.
Pastors need to do is take advantage of their captive audience, because if they can get the message to the parents of the children, then the children can get the message from the parents.
Sheriff Layton is optimistic because mutual respect and basically living by the golden rule will successfully bring churches, the community, and law enforcement together.
We can start respect again, not just for the uniform, but for the people in those churches.
Amber Strong, CBN News in Indianapolis.
Still ahead, we're going to sit down with North Korean defectors who are risking it all to share the gospel message. Stay with us. North Korea is a growing threat to the world, but it always has oppressed its own citizens. For Christians there, believing in God could carry a death sentence, and for two North Koreans, the only way to live was to escape. Our Asia correspondent Lucille Toulousan has that story.
For security reasons, we shall conceal their identities and call them Jae-un and Sung-min, both North Korean defectors. Jae-un is the lone survivor in a family of 5 siblings. Her father was taken to a labor camp in North Korea when she was 2 years old. He was never heard of again. During the Great Famine in the mid-1990s, her only brother died of malnutrition. Her mother died on the road while trying to find food to bring back to her starving family.
When my mother died, we did not have the strength to bury her.
My older sister went to China to earn a living for the family. She sent money once to buy rice, but I never heard of her after that. I learned that she was sold as a slave. My older sister engaged in smuggling, got caught, and was sent to a labor camp where she also died.
Out of desperation, Jae-un decided to escape from North Korea.
One night in December of 1999, I crossed the Yalu River and swam for the Chinese border. The water was freezing and the current was so strong, but I was determined to survive. After arriving in China, I chose to be sold to a man so I could live in the big city. But I ran away from him because he did not treat me well.
It was then that Jae-un joined a Bible study group in China. She remembered the woman she met prior to her escape, who spoke to her about God.
She told me that God is alive and is with me since He is the father to the fatherless and the defender of the widows. I had heard of God in North Korea, but I was also aware that believers are taken to prison. I was able to make a phone call to my only surviving sister in North Korea, and I told her about Jesus Christ and that God will help her through the harsh times. She accepted Christ as Savior. However, officials discovered that we were communicating, and so they took my sister to a labor camp. And since then, I never heard of her again.
Jae-un married a North Korean man she met in church, and they eventually moved to South Korea. Unlike Jae-un, who lived in poverty, Sung-min was well off and a college graduate in North Korea. But he says he was disenchanted with his country and decided to leave.
I knew that the Kim regime was enjoying a luxurious life while so many people were starving to death. In January 2007, I crossed the Tumen River into China. However, the South Korean family I met there didn't welcome me because I was not part of their family. The border guards told me to go to a church where I can get help, but I refused because I was an atheist. I hid in an apartment in China and started to find ways to commit suicide. In June 2007, a Chinese man I got to know during the river crossing brought a preacher to me. He said he understood my hardships, and Jesus Christ died on the cross for me. When I heard it, I felt something heavy in my heart. It was the first time in my life that I had such feelings. I thought I was nothing, but Jesus died on the cross to give me eternal life. I cried, knelt down, and prayed with him.
Behind me is the railroad track that takes tourists to the boundary of North Korea. North Korean defectors continue to hope that one day they will be able to cross over to the other side to be reunited with their loved ones. Sung-min believes 60,000 North Koreans have defected, but half of them decided to return to North Korea.
They have gone back to minister to their families. There are about 30,000 of them who belong to the underground churches in North Korea.
Today, Jae-un and Sung-min run a Christian radio program in South Korea that features North Koreans transformed by Christ. The program also promotes unity among North and South Koreans in preparation for reunification.
I believe God has a plan for us and will reunite Korea in His time and in His way. Our program aims to embrace the differences and restore common identity of the people of two Koreas.
Even though my life was extremely harsh, God chose me as His child, and it is Him who brought me here. So I will praise His name and spread the gospel of Jesus Christ until the very end of my life.
Lucille Talusen, CBN News, Seoul.
Persecuted Christians in North Korea are desperate for the Word of God. The humanitarian group World Help believers in the Hermit Kingdom are willing to risk their lives to acquire a copy of the Bible. Our Charlene Aaron spoke with World Help about its work.
Well, you know, countless believers across North Korea have never even seen a copy of the scriptures. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we hear stories all the time of people who just have a few handwritten verses on a piece of paper, and that's their Bible, or they don't have a Bible at all. They've never seen one. They've only heard it through word of mouth, or they just have to go on what other people tell them. So that's why World Help has gotten involved in North Korea and is distributing Bibles there to underground believers who want to learn more about the scriptures. They want to grow in their relationship with Jesus Christ, but they just don't have those opportunities.
Absolutely.
So,
well,
yeah.
Rachel, I know that you mentioned, getting caught with the Bible means prison or death in North Korea. What are some of the links that Christians or believers are going to in order to read God's word? You told a very interesting story in a Fox column that I read. If you could share just a little bit of that.
Sure, absolutely. They go to extreme lengths. Like I said, in the Fox column, there's this one church that actually meets on a riverboat, and they have to hide their Bibles, so they can't read the Bibles until they are far out away from everyone else, and then they can read those scriptures. But those Bibles have been hidden time and time again. They've been stuffed in these secret hiding places, and a lot of times that means that they're falling apart, and there are never enough Bibles for all of the secret believers. So that's why we're working so hard to make sure that those Bibles get into the hands of the believers who want them.
And how is your organization helping to get those Bibles to Christians?
Sure. So we have a network of distributors throughout North Korea that we've been working with for years. They obviously have to work in very secretive manners, change up their methods constantly. But they're willing to take that risk, so we're going to help them. So what World Help has done is last year we set a goal of raising the money to send 100,000 Bibles to North Korea, and we're very close to reaching that goal.
And how would you encourage believers here in the West to pray for our persecuted brothers and sisters there in North Korea?
That's a great question, and prayer is definitely the number one thing that we can give our North Korean brothers and sisters. So, Scripture tells us in Hebrews 13 that we're supposed to remember our brothers in prison as if we were in prison with them, and those who are mistreated as if we were the ones being mistreated. Our brothers and sisters in North Korea are part of the body of Christ, and when they're hurting, we're all hurting. And so that's why World Help wants to stand by these believers, wants to help generous donors who want to give to this cause to stand by these believers, because they desperately need our help. And we can do that through prayer and through giving them Bibles.
Absolutely. And we're certainly going to be praying, and we're going to see how we can help with Bibles too. Rachel Godwin, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
God bless.
Christian artist Lauren Daigle performed on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon Thursday. She sang the title track of her second album, Look Up Child, that's already set Billboard records. Take a listen. And you can see the full video at cbnnews.com on our entertainment page. Great performance. Time now for your Friday Faithful, and today I leave you with this message. The end of your rope is where God can begin his greatest work, and there is no doubt it is him doing the work because you're at the end of your rope. Stop trying to fix things in your own strength and let God be that perfect strength for you. That will do it for this half hour of the CBN News Watch. Remember, you can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that by emailing newswatch@cbn.com. You can also reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Have a fabulous Friday and a wonderful weekend. We'll see you Monday.